Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. I'm pleased to have with us tonight Mr. Harry Gross. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you.
Harry, I must comment, we've wondered about the impact of Lenin on the world, and I must confess that I hope you're not psychologically going in the direction of Lenin in regards to his beard. No, that's not something that just crept out of the woodwork.
If anyone, I'm more Alex Klein with Trotsky in the beard at that point.
Is that a Trotsky look?
It's more of a Trotskyist beard.
Well, it really makes a statement.
But I do need to trim it up a little bit.
No, it's quite fetching. Well, all right, so we can talk about a lot of things. We've talked in the past about the war in the Middle East and the events that are occurring, and I guess trying to kibitz a little bit on what our country's strategy would be, particularly President Trump, how things are going, and the idea there are checks and balances that are out there that could be employed to change that policy. And I think as we consider this, we're very dependent on facts. And I mean, there have been several inquiries lately about what are the facts of what's going on here, but they're not easy. It's not easy to understand what's up. It does appear that the world's, the more we do this, the 8 billion plus people on the planet are going through substantial travail. I mean, not so much us, we have our problems, but Sub-Saharan Africa, Japan, different parts of the world are having substantial impacts because of the exports that come through the Persian Gulf, particularly fertilizer. All these issues are up there. Inflation, jet fuel, who knows what kind of crises are happening. So a lot of things are going on now that I don't believe were anticipated. So it could be said that as one assesses this, there was some policy errors that seem to have happened, the same way that things happened in the earlier Gulf Wars. The idea that there are nuclear weapons in Iraq, and what a fiasco that was. That's a terrible thing. That's terrible, 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 terrible. And apparently our intelligence apparatus was manipulated to come to this conclusion. And I don't think we've had enough of a discussion as to how that happened. And it's particularly germane. The same, we're now in this other conflict, and with the same kind of reason. I get to say, well, there are nuclear weapons, or they're going to have nuclear weapons, and we can't allow this country to have nuclear weapons. And why is that? Well, they would probably kill a lot of people if they did that, and I don't know, more so than North Korea. I mean, they have and their next door neighbors have nuclear weapons. India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons, and I don't doubt they're obtainable. And if someone really wanted to do something bad, there's biological warfare, there's chemical warfare, poison gas. There are lots of things that could be horrifically accomplished without nuclear weapons that are quite dangerous to the world, or just terrorist attacks. As far as that goes, you could blow some airplanes up or crash an airplane into whatever you wanted to do. There are lots of things that bad actors can do short of nuclear weapons. The nuclear weapons are bad. I have no question about it. It would be bad. It would be better if no countries have them. Now, particularly the Israelis have nuclear weapons and have had them against American desires for, 40 years or so. And they have, presumably, they're really, really well equipped if they, because of their strategic situation, to do whatever they need to. And so lots of nuclear weapons around, and it's, okay, that's the reason that we're doing this. But what are the, seemingly so? It's not exactly clear, but that seems to be the major objective right now. But other objectives that were touted about would be like female liberation. I mean, that would, whatever it is, or also different ethnic groups in Iran could be freed, and the people on the street would be happier, and the religious group go away. Many. So regime change. What are we actually up to? All of these things have been alleged. This is why we're doing it. What is the evidence for this, and what is the cost for it? And then was this extraordinary policy decision appropriately vetted and advised upon? Presumably, there was some negative advice about doing this. And a question could ask, and I'll turn this over to you, could a rabbit be pulled out of a hat? Now, I've, as an observer of what's going on here, I've been quite critical, I guess I'd say. I mean, I try and give the president credit, but, I'm concerned about what's going on. But it appeared, maybe one day last week, that I just had to take my hat off. It looks like this is going to work out. They're going to reopen the strait. They're going to have some kind of peace treaty, and it does appear that that the Iranians will not aggressively pursue a nuclear policy, and everything is going to work out. It looked possible, and then the situation collapsed, and people that oppose President Trump would say, well, this is another example of his mad, ego-driven policy arrangements or whatever he's up to. But there's evidence, I think, on the other side that this is some kind of strategy that, if ill-conceived, maybe, but the strategy would be to bring the Iranians to the bargaining table by all these really terrible threats, which basically amounted to, I'd say, war crimes. We're going to commit war crimes. Every newborn who's like the Pharaoh, every male under 2 years old is going to be killed with nuclear radiation, or what, just the most draconian threats possible. And they responded to it. And Trump would say, hey, I grew up in New York, in the tough part of New York, in the Bronx or wherever. And hey, it's tough on the street. I know how, you just have to be that way. And I don't know, is it A or B? And how is this going to end? And what lessons should the American people learn? And then how can we extract ourselves from this? I'll throw those questions to you.
All right, there's a lot to answer here. First, I think it's worth noting that we used to be in a much better place with Iran. Under the Obama administration, we had negotiated the JCPOA that had removed 97% of their enrichable uranium. We had hobbled their nuclear program voluntarily. We had international observers that were allowed in. We had kind of taken Iran off the table a little bit.
Were the Israelis happy about
The Israelis were not happy about that, remotely.
So when, from our purposes, we could say this is a pretty positive political turn of events. This is okay for the American people. Yeah, the guy's a little nutty there, but so is the North Korean guys. And and they may try and do something to attack Israel and more generally the West and the U.S. They could do something.
Yeah.
They certainly have to be watched very carefully, and the CIA should keep an eye on them. And right now, there's no overt things that more peaceful.
Yeah, we had brought them to the table. We got a foot in the door. We had mechanisms established to watch them, right? But this was deeply unpopular with the Israelis and deeply unpopular with critics of Obama. I have my thoughts on Obama's foreign policy, but this was really a triumph, and it was multilateral. It was not just the U.S. We had France, Great Britain, and I think Germany was also involved in guaranteeing this treaty. It was a multilateral treaty.
Yes.
And for some reason, this caught Donald Trump's ire. I'm still not exactly sure why he singled in on this agreement in particular.
There are conspiracy theories about that.
Well, there were, but for some reason, this caught his ire. And one of the first things he did in his first term in office was take us out of the JCPOA. Yeah. And without U.S. Involvement, France said, well, really, we really don't have time to do this either. The whole thing fell apart. And so Iran began to pursue a nuclear weapon again, as they had the sovereign right to do.
What role
theoretically.
did sanctions play?
It's
a complicated story. It's hard
It
to
is
know
a
all the
complicated.
details.
We had released some sanctions in the sense that we had released some frozen assets that we
A
had
lot
held.
of money. The plane arrived with $6 billion.
It
or
was,
something.
yeah, it was, but it was. I mean, it was already their money. We had
That
just
was their
frozen
money,
it.
that's
It was their money. So I want to make we weren't paying them. We just let them
We
have it.
To have their money back that we owed them.
Yeah, that was like
company,
in bank accounts that we'd frozen. But that was it was a PR nightmare. I mean, I will admit that it did not look good for the U.S. to have pallets of money showing up in the Iranian in Tehran. But it was when the JCPOA was terminated in 2016. 2017 rather. It removed the only constraints we had put on Iran. At the same time, the Israeli government got much more hardline against Iranian nuclear programs. They were very happy the JCPOA had been gotten rid of, and they upped their rhetoric against Iran and their actual attacks against Iran. Cyber attacks, in particular, have been used to kind of disrupt the program. And over the years, Iran quietly developed a program. Not necessarily, we still have no 100% guarantee that they actually were close to developing a nuclear weapon.
That is a profound
Yeah.
question, if we're a profound one, and I don't know if we've had answers. It's particularly incumbent on the intelligence community to explain what the current thinking is, and in light of the Iraq fiasco. What a fiasco that was. It was a tremendous trick played on the intelligence agencies by someone, and I wonder who that could be. And I'll let you think about it. And the other, another trick, are we getting a trick here? Since this is in the Israeli, they perceive this, or the government perceives this in their interest to do this. Now, not every Israeli believes that, and there are all kinds of contrary opinions.
Yes.
But that's what's happening now, and their intelligence agencies are on the field in these arrangements.
And to be fair to Israel, that there is a legitimate perception of an existential threat from Iran.
Yes.
I mean, there is a legitimate perception of a threat. And
No
so for
question
Iran
about
to get a nuclear weapon would be a great equalizer in the region that would represent a real threat to Israel's survival, because now there would be nuclear détente, right? There'd be nuclear parity. As long as Israel's the only nuclear state in the Middle East, they have a greater degree of security than anything else.
And on that point, I mean, it's very reasonable to understand the Israeli viewpoint. I mean, for thousands of years, these terrible things happen. Holocaust, this happens, that happens. Actually, the Persians carried them away when they were the first.
The Persians let them go. It was the Babylonians that took them away. It was the Persians that let them go.
Okay, that's the point. But in any event, they've been enmeshed. Well, that's 2,600 years ago. There've been a lot of things going back and forth.
538 BC.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. That's about the right year. But just saying that, they very, very, a card in the deck is their how they feel like. I mean, I'm speaking for them, but I mean, it's my observation that seems to be the point, that they're very, very paranoid about anyone that would try and injure them, and how common that has been and continues to be. Plus, what happened when they were slaughtered. Almost 1,000 Israelis were slaughtered by people crossing over from the Gaza Strip, and they could well imagine if their enemies became too powerful, they would be extinguished. And it's a reasonable. It's a reasonable thing to think.
Yeah.
And if the Persians, the Iranians get nuclear weapons, I think the Israelis would think, well, this could be it. Just a bomb in Tel Aviv, one 40 megaton bomb. That's it.
And it's not even the question of necessarily. I think the great fear is not even Iran getting a bomb. It's whether Iran's proxies then get access to some of these weapons, right? One of Israel's worst nightmares is a nuclear Hezbollah, to some degree, right? Or a nuclear Houthis. What does that do to the region? So, I mean, there are a lot of arguments against Iran having a nuclear weapon, There are
very-
also some arguments for letting them have one in terms of regional stability, particularly when it comes to the Sunni Shiite conflict and their Cold War with the Saudis.
Well, the Saudis might want nuclear weapons. Too.
Yeah, they also want a nuclear
Well,
weapon.
that's so everybody. There's a proliferation.
It's a proliferation concern.
And just to say this, one of it, just to me, the 1,000-foot picture of what's going on here is the world community, the 8 billion people. So after World War II and after the triumph of the West versus the Soviet Union, that the world was sort of seen as one tremendous community under Western values, with the U.S. being the sort of big brother in the world, and their values being the ones that were emulated, and people, it's the top of the world's pecking order. Let's be like the U.S. Let's take their values. Let's not kill people. Let's be nice to everyone. And maybe disarm will depend on the United Nations. And free trade will be there. Our prosperity will increase. We can get access to U.S. universities. We can go back and forth. We can, honeymoon in Miami. We can do whatever. And U.S. investors will come to our country. Capital will flow, and we'll just be a better world. Now, the problem is the way the brain is structured, I might say, the inner group, the out group, and nation states. So one of the things that I think has happened since the last Trump election is the idea of the nation state trumping the world order. So the nation state is going to, particularly the U.S., so a powerful nation state can do pretty much what it wishes. Its power, might makes right. Mm-hmm. So same sort of the Kaiser would understand this.
Yeah.
Anyone Napoleon would understand it. People would understand. It's just a very common human way to behave.
It's a very 19th century way to behave.
Well, I think I would say 17th, 14th, 12th, 15th. It's just commonly human history.
A modern phenomena, yes.
So the swing back is extremely impressive. Tariffs are a big part of it. We're going to have tariffs, and there's a lot of pro and con about porous borders. So if you're really an internationalist, if you want to say that, border passports are bad. Any kind of restrictions on flow of capital or humans, and whatever the national psyche is, it's dangerous to have national psyches. Maybe the softball teams can be there. Armies are bad. Patriotism is bad, or at least has to be guarded. I mean, you really be on the lookout. The so-called Christian nationalists, how bad those people are. All of those things are out there, and the situation has swung back the other way, extraordinarily so. And that seems to me to be the real way to think about this. Well, nation states versus the world.
There is the resurgence of nationalism in the last decade has had real impacts, and that does affect this conflict. But this is not the first time we've done this to Iran. I mean, in the first place,
right.
Part of it is there is this inability in the West, in particular, to recognize, and this is a sin that the U.S. and Great Britain are particularly guilty of, to recognize that there are other nationalisms.
Not the French.
Well, the French are problematic about this too, but for different reasons.
Okay, all right. There's more than one.
There's more than one villain.
There's more than one villain in the house.
But the U.S. and Great Britain in particular share this inability to recognize other nationalisms. The U.S. Britain thought that everything was religious, that it was all about religion. The U.S. saw communism in every corner. And so you couldn't be a nationalist movement, you were communist. You couldn't be you couldn't be a nation, you were a religious group moving. And Iran fell victim to this in particular in the Cold War. Iran had for decades been a major focus, well actually for centuries, of the Great Game, right? I mean, the conflict between Britain and Russia over Central Asia. Iran was a focal point of that. Persia was central to that. And then with the discovery of oil reserves, Britain really put its foot down in trying to control access to that for its own national security. And in the 1950s, Iran pushed back on that. Iranian nationalism came into its own. They ousted the Shah, they created a democratic government, and they nationalized the oil reserves. Britain convinced the Dulles brothers, who saw communism around every corner, who did not believe in nationalism at all outside of the Western world, that Mossadegh, the prime minister, was not a nationalist, he was a communist. And so successfully convinced the United States to overthrow Mossadegh's government, and we reinstalled the Shah, who promptly gave us access to Iranian oil and established a vicious repressive regime that sought to thoroughly overhaul and modernize the country, which was good in some areas, but was deeply controversial and dangerous to many Iranian civilians. In 1979, Iran Revolution comes to the fore, not just as a religious movement, but as a nationalist movement. It was the Ayatollahs were the last kind of group that had any legitimacy left in Iranian society that was in opposition to the Shah, which was seen not as an Iranian institution anymore because he had been installed by the United States, was seen as a foreign puppet, was seen as a tool of foreign domination. So good Iranian patriots were obligated to go with the Ayatollahs. Now, that regime led to brutal crackdowns, betrayals of coalitions that had been built among nationalist groups. It was not a net win for the Iranian people, but it was a nationalist response to foreign intervention in the new great game. And so the way we've treated Iran since 1979 has been a continued inability to see this as a desire for an independent, sovereign Iranian nation, and we've instead treated it as a pariah because of its religion, its theocracy, and because of its anti-Americanism. But we've never paused to ask, are they anti-American because they have legitimate grievances, or are they anti-American just because they hate our freedoms and therefore they're our enemies?
There's a real, the national dialogue, the complexities of different groups and how they interact with each other are out there. And the perception would be, well, we're going to put our national interests aside to have some respectful dialogue with you. So we're powerful, and we've got very strong interests ourselves, but we're going to forget that. We're going to ask you to present your comments of what you would like, and we'll see if we can adhere to that. Well, what would you like? I'd like Islamic world. I'd like a sultan. I'd like whatever. And I want women to wear veils. What else would you like? Well, I particularly hate Jewish people. I'd like to do something to them.
Well, I would point out that the world's second largest Jewish community in the Middle East is in Tehran.
But the tremendous, a big thing that happened. I mean, I think there's a strong case to say that the Islamic people treated the Jewish people certainly better than the Spaniards did. Yeah. Everyone went to Turkey, although in the Quran there's extremely powerful anti-Jewish statements, particularly in the Book of the Cow. Very powerful, and less so, but powerful against Christian people. I mean, so what I'm saying is that their viewpoints are not necessarily ones that we can adhere to straight away. And then what the people that are, quote, patriots, what does that mean exactly? How corrupt are you? In your gang, do you routinely not steal money? And I mean, they're humans.
I know, but I would ask the counter question. You were exemplifying what I just said, which is that their nationalists can't be legitimate because how corrupt are they? How corrupt are our patriots?
My comment was this: is the idea that this is some kind of a superior moral viewpoint that's far past ours. I mean, and you can make the case maybe it's not as good as ours, but to say it's superior to ours is a step too far.
Well, I'm not saying that it's superior, and that's a very different question. What we're getting in, if nationalism requires a sovereign nation, and now you can go to ultranationalism, which is the supremacy of your nation. My group is better than your group. We have an inherent right to do whatever we want to do because we are better than you, we're morally superior than you, we are racially superior than you, however you want to phrase it.
Don't you think the Iranians think that about Arabs? You don't think they think that about
Well,
Arabs?
to some degree, there's
any
Persian
person-
supremacy over Arabs. Yes, there's question of that.
mean, there's-
But again, no nationalism is perfect. But what I'm saying though is to rush immediately to the far end negates the ability to negotiate. What I would argue is that if you look at this conflict from a lens of nationalism, in the sense that you have an ultra-nationalist Israel, you have an increasingly ultra-nationalist United States, and you have a nationalist that is becoming to some degree ultra-nationalist Iran, I'll grant you that point, then you have a scenario in which no one can do anything because either we're all entitled to it or we're not. And if you take a step back and you say, okay, we have the Iranian nation is entitled to sovereignty over its own borders, then you can have a meaningful negotiation. They're going to outright reject foreign impositions and foreign demands of you can't have a nuclear program because that's a violation of national sovereignty. Now, you can establish some limitations, you can figure out a compromise, but you have to accept the premise that that nation has a right to pursue whatever forms of weapons or energy it sees fit to. Now, we can try and disincentivize that. We can try and, through international cooperation, shape that path. But to tell the Iranians that they have no right to a nuclear weapon makes no sense, because how do we have a right to a nuclear
Just
weapon?
like the Russians are telling the Ukrainians they can't join NATO.
Exactly. Exactly. It's an absurd premise.
But that's the point of sort of this interchange, is that once we go past this idea we're on some kind of world order, instead we are competing groups, then naturally the way groups compete with each other is they try and get the better position. The other point, and just going back slightly into the Iranian history, our involvement, the U.S. involvement in there happened, I think, in World War II. And one of the thing was going on is the world order was certainly being tremendously challenged by Axis powers in 41, 42. Who's going to win the war? And then Joe Stalin had this terrible, millions of people are dead. The Nazis are going wherever, and there would be a question. The Russians might just join. They're an authoritarian country. They'd signed a peace treaty earlier. Maybe they would think Hitler will do a deal with them, and I'm just going to go over to his side. So the West supporting Stalin was a tremendous geopolitical given to try and do that. They were sending ships through the North Atlantic, and they didn't work. They were being killed, destroyed. The convoys weren't making it. How can we get goods to the Soviet Union? And the way was through Persia. So the deal was struck, and the U.S. it became important to have a highway and railroad, which the U.S. constructed. They constructed a railroad from the Persian Gulf up to Russia. So the support of the Iranian government to this great purpose was primary in Western policy, and how well they were being treated or not treated, or we're putting a railroad right through your country. Maybe you have Sabbath. We drink alcohol, we do this, we do that. Hey, we're going to do this because we're powerful and it's our national interest. And it could be said in that part of the world and many parts of the world, that's a very understandable kind of deal, unfortunately so. So you could say, hey, that's just normal behavior in this part of the world. And I think that's how things got started. Now it's getting time to leave. 1 minute, but the takeaway, and I'll let you talk. But what I see here is you're correct on many points. Our deal with the Iranians requires some degree of respect, some kind of, you're a human being. Let's talk about it. I mean, you're not some subhuman, as unfortunately I think our politicians often give that wrong impact. And so the Iranians have that, I guess, appropriate desire to be treated like humans as best they see it. Okay, on your comment.
Well, I think to close, I think it's also worth remembering that Iran didn't start this conflict. We attacked them last year. and supposedly decimated their nuclear program. Then, conveniently around the time that Netanyahu is supposed to face upcoming charges or trial for corruption charges that he's been delaying for years, now all of a sudden Iran is getting a nuclear weapon again. And so based on whatever intelligence we had, which again, we don't, to our point at the beginning, we don't even know what the intelligence was that we had. But based on that decision, we started this, right? We dropped the bombs.
That's true. We did it.
And
this was like Pearl Harbor. We were the Japanese at Pearl Harbor.
It was. I mean, we started this.
We started it.
And now we're getting mad that they punched back. And there is a way out of this. You asked at the beginning, can a rabbit be pulled out of the hat? Yes, I think there can be. I think this is salvageable. It's going to require a lot of concessions on the part of the United States. It's going to require a lot of concessions on the part of Israel. The Israeli war in Lebanon right now is one of the big sticking points over current peace negotiations. There is a possibility to get a new deal. Now, will we be worse off than if we had just kept the JCPOA in 2017? Yes, we will. We'll recreate the JCPOA with extra steps that have, with a lot of lives lost and a lot of money spent. But we can do that, and we can get back to a point where we can bring Iran out of the cold a little bit. They'll feel more respected. We can respect their national sovereignty, and we can prevent nuclear proliferation, which should be the goal, right? I think nuclear weapons are one of the worst things ever developed in human history. But we can find a way out of this. We just have to have a cohesive strategy that really is not reactive, that has a real plan, which so far no one seems to have a real plan. But if we can develop a real strategy and figure out a way to make the means that we have at our disposal match the ends that we want, we can pull a rabbit out of a hat. Trump can sign perhaps a lasting peace agreement and get his name on it. And maybe if we pull it right, he'll even get a Nobel Peace Prize for it. And I would be all for that. I mean, I really would. I know that's shocking for me to say. If we can get a real peace deal out of this. But a lot of intentionality has to be done on our part, on the Israelis' part, and we need to have a frank discussion of what are we willing to compromise on to make this work?
Well, on that note, Harry, thank you for those insights, and we'll talk some more, and events may overtake us.
As always.
All right. Thank you.
A pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Right.